Hello, and welcome to my first in a new series of Baldur's Gate 3 meets D&D videos. This series is designed as a guide for video game lovers who want to get into the world of tabletop D&D but don't know where to start. By taking well-known characters from the Dungeons & Dragons based video game Baldur's Gate 3, I'll show you how to recreate those same characters in Dungeons & Dragons. I'll take things slow and break down each element of character creation in a way that's easy to understand for someone who has never tried to play D&D before. If you find anything confusing or have further questions, please don't hesitate to leave a comment below. For this first video, I'm going to guide you through how to build one of the most lusted after characters in Baldur's Gate 3, Astarion. Once the game was released, it didn't take long for legions of Astarion-thirsty fans to flood social media with proclamations of desire for this ethically dubious yet lovable rogue. Neil Newbon, the voice actor who brought the character to life, won multiple awards for his vocal performance, which is nothing short of impressive. I will point out that for this series I won't be teaching you how to play D&D, instead my goal is to break down that wall between video gaming and tabletop gaming and make it easier to understand how to navigate the world of dice rolls. You can find the character sheet for Astarion ready to download from D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond is a website now owned by Wizards of the Coast, the creators of Dungeons & Dragons. With Baldur's Gate 3 being a licensed property of Wizards of the Coast, they have already created the character sheets of the main NPCs and made them free to download. There's a link to the sheet in the show notes below. Let's begin by breaking down the different sections of the character sheet to make all this a little less confusing. Astarion is an elf, which for most people is easy enough to understand. Picture Legolas from Lord of the Rings. Elves are beautiful, otherworldly, often youthful creatures who radiate magic. Tall and slender, they are graceful, wise and artistic. Elves are a race in Dungeons & Dragons. Other races include humans, dwarves, halflings and dragonborns, to name but a few. Every race has their own special traits, and choosing your race has an impact on what you are naturally good or bad at. You can think of your race as the thing that defines your biology, what you look like, and in some cases it can define where you're from and your upbringing. In D&D, elves are further divided into sub-races: dark elves or drows, eladrin, wood elves, pallid elves and high elves. Astarion is the last of these, a high elf. But what does that mean exactly, and what's important about that? Each subrace of elf has an affinity to a particular element of nature or magic or place. The type of elf you are may impact what magic you know, which languages you speak, or what advantages and disadvantages you have. Being a high elf, Astarion is intelligent and has an innate knowledge of basic magic. If you navigate over his character sheet, under spells we can see the minor illusion cantrip. Don't worry too much about that right now, we'll come back to it in a bit. Given their intelligence, high elves gain an ability point in intelligence, which we'll get to in a moment. High elves also have proficiency with certain weapons, namely longswords, short bows and longbows. If race defines how you look, then in D&D class defines what you do. Astarion is a rogue. As you can imagine, rogues are stealthy, cunning, sly and fast. If you're planning a heist, you'll definitely want a rogue in your team. Rogues don't rely on strength to deal damage. Instead, they aim carefully, causing a lot of pain with a precise cut in just the right place. Other classes in D&D include fighters, barbarians, druids and more, each of them bringing their own set of skills to the table. As a rogue, Astarion gets to choose some skills he's already good at. He also learns how to use a bunch of different weapons, meaning he can deal more damage with them. He gets some new abilities as well, but before we tackle those, it's time we finally tackle those confusing numbers: the ability scores. In many RPG video games, when you create your character, you're able to select where you'd like to focus your abilities. Are you going to be really strong with loads of health, or be light and fast on your feet avoiding combat? Often you have a pool of points that you can assign to your character. You choose the kind of build you want depending on how you want to play the game. It's the same in D&D. Let me quickly break down the ability scores for you. Strength: how strong you are. When you want to throw a rock at an enemy's head, how hard do you throw that rock? Dexterity: how fast you are. You need to slip your hand into the pocket of a guard and steal his keys. Does he notice you, or are you fast enough to avoid detection? Constitution, how healthy you are. You drink poison. Are you spending all night throwing up, or does your stomach of steel make quick work of the side effects? Intelligence, how book smart you are. You're face to face with a beast in the wild. Do you know what the creature is? Do you know its strengths, weaknesses, where it came from, what it's called? Wisdom, how street smart you are. You come across a ferocious, bloodthirsty beast you've never seen before. Do you rightly run for your life, or do you think it's friendly and try to pet it? Charisma, how confident and personable you are. A guard catches you attempting to steal something. Can you talk your way out of the situation? Can you persuade him it was all just a misunderstanding? Does he believe these aren't the droids he's looking for? Deciding which numbers go into these boxes is either done by choosing from a pool of predetermined values or rolling a lot of dice. The predetermined values in D&D are 8, 10, 12, 13, 14 and 15. These are the numbers used in Baldur's Gate 3 for each of the characters. With ability scores, a 10 means that you're okay at a thing. You're not particularly good at it, nor are you bad at it. Let's take strength for example. If you're building a character who fights up close with a sword, strength is going to be pretty important. You'd want your strength to be your highest score, so you'd likely assign 15 to that. The character may not necessarily need to be too intelligent to swing a sword around, so you might put your low score of 8 into intelligence. We call this a dump stat. The dump stat is the ability you can put your lowest number of points into because it's not necessarily important for that character. Once you put your points into your ability score, you can work out your modifier. For every 2 points you put into an ability, you get 1 modifier point. Take the fighter example again. If we put a 15 in strength, it means you get a 2 modifier, or +2. But what does that mean exactly? In game, when you're asked to roll a strength check, you will roll a d20 dice and then add 2 to the result. It's like a little bonus that you get with every roll. But for intelligence, our dump stat, the number was 8, which gets you -1 point. So whatever the d20 lands on, you have to subtract 1 point from it. This was an extremely quick crash course into ability scores. Hopefully it made sense to you. But if not, please leave a comment below and I will try and address your questions or make a more in-depth video in the future. Let's now take a look at how Astarion's points have been allocated. Being a rogue, Astarion's main ability should be dexterity. He needs to be able to move quickly, sneak lightly, and have a fast hand for picking pockets. We'll put the score of 15 in there. Now you'll notice Astarion's score here is 17, not 15, and we'll talk about that in a moment. His second highest score is Constitution. That's where we'll put the 14. The 13 goes into Wisdom and the 12 goes into Intelligence. Again, don't worry that it says 13 here. I'll come to that in a moment. Put the 10 in Charisma, and finally, his dump stat is Strength. There's no need for a sneaky rogue who has long range attacks to need Strength, as they tend to be hidden or attacking from a distance. If your rogue is on the front line gathering aggro from the enemies, you have a bigger problem. Now let's talk about those difference in the numbers. Astarion's dex score in game is a 17 even though we put a 15 in the box. Why is that? Well, it comes down to his race. Being an elf, due to their very nature of being light-footed and speedy, they gain a +2 modifier in dexterity. As a high elf, Astarion gains a further +1 to his intelligence, which is why that's a 13 and not a 12. These bring the final modifiers to -1 for strength, +3 for dex, +2 to constitution, +1 for both intelligence and wisdom, and finally no change to charisma. Astarion is beginning to take shape. Now let's look at his skills. We've already seen above how race can affect your abilities. Your speed, strength and constitution can all be determined by your biology, but your chosen profession also has some perks available to you. In D&D, each class has its own proficiencies. These are abilities and skills you are exceptionally good at. At first level, every character gets 2 proficiency points. These points get added to certain skills on top of your ability modifiers. Your class will dictate where these points are assigned. The first place to be aware of are your saving throws. A saving throw is a dice roll you have to make against particular enemy attacks. For example, if you're hit by a poison arrow, you would roll a constitution saving throw to see if you become poisoned. Or if a dragon breathes fire on you, you would roll a dex saving throw to see if you move out of the way in time to take less damage. Rogues get proficiency in dexterity and intelligence saving throws. So for Astarion, this means that you add a further 2 to the +3 from dexterity and the +1 from intelligence. The other numbers are the same as the ability modifiers. As a rogue, Astarion can choose 4 skill proficiencies from a bunch of different skills. On the sheet you can see there's a P beside the chosen skills Acrobatics, Deception, History, Perception and Persuasion. But wait Mo, that's 5 skills. You said he could only have 4. The keen-eyed amongst you will have indeed noticed that I mentioned 5 skills and not 4. That's because Astarion, as an elf, gains proficiency in Perception. A rogue also gets the Expertise skill. They get to choose 2 skills, or a skill and a tool, to be an expert in. Expertise lets you double your proficiency score for that particular skill. For Astarion, Sleight of Hand and Stealth were chosen, giving him a +7 modifier for any rolls in these skills. So when you're picking a lock with Astarion in Baldur's Gate 3 and you have to roll a d20, that's where the +7 comes from. It's always useful to have a rogue in your party for this reason alone. Now we've tackled some of the really complicated stuff, let's look at other parts of the sheet and break them down. HP or hit points refer to how much health your character has. This is determined by your hit dice, which is assigned to your class and your constitution modifier. A rogue's hit dice is a d8. At your starting level, you get 8 points plus your constitution modifier, which in Astarion's case is 2, giving him an HP of 10. As you level up, you will need to roll your hit dice to see what your maximum health increases to. Your AC or armor class determines how hard an enemy has to hit you in order for you to start taking damage. Astarion's AC is a 14. This comes from his leather armor. In D&D, leather armor gives you an AC of 11, plus your dexterity modifier, totaling 14 for Astarion. Imagine someone attempts to attack with a dagger. They will need to roll a d20 plus their attack modifier, and if that total is 14 or above, they land a hit and can roll for damage. If the total is less than 14, it means that they miss. This could be due to Astarion's leather armor being too strong for their dagger, or maybe it's because Astarion moved out of the way in time. That's up to you or your DM to add some flourish to make the narrative more exciting. A character's initiative is their speed to act when something happens. At the start of the fight, the DM will probably say something like, roll for initiative, which means let's see how fast you get yourself together and move. The character with the highest initiative roll is the one who goes first. When playing Baldur's Gate 3 and you see the characters at the top of the screen, the order they are in is based on their initiative roll. All characters, whether they are player characters or NPCs, will roll a d20 to determine their initiative. As you can imagine, initiative is speed based, so relies on dexterity. Your initiative roll is a d20 plus your dexterity modifier. For Astarion, this is +3. The player's race determines their movement speed. Elves have a walking speed of 30 feet. This means that in a turn of combat they can move up to 30 feet. Let's take a look at what Astarion can do in a round of combat. As well as moving, a player can take an action. Actions include attacking, casting a spell, dashing, and more. When it comes to attacking, Astarion has 2 main weapons. A dagger, which does 1d4 plus 3 damage, and a short bow, which does 1d6 plus 3 damage. You roll the d20 first, and then add the attack modifier. You can see here it's a +5 for Astarion. That's because he uses a dexterity for his attack, which gives him a +3. But, in addition, being a high elf, he has proficiency with short bows, giving him that additional +2 proficiency bonus. If the number on that attack roll is equal or above the enemy's AC, as we discussed previously, then you can roll for damage. For the damage, you roll the damage dice associated to that weapon. For the short bow, that's a 1d6 plus your dexterity modifier, another +3. Being a high elf awards Astarion some basic spellcasting abilities. He can cast 1 cantrip from the wizard spell list, with his intelligence being the source of this skill. A cantrip is a spell you can cast as many times as you like without using any spell slots. In most cases, they don't tend to be very powerful given that you can cast them an unlimited amount of time. Astarion's chosen spell here is Minor Illusion, which allows him to create a sound or image of an object. It's quite useful for distracting enemies. In addition to actions, some characters may also get bonus actions. This could be to perform another attack, to disengage, or to hide. In later levels, Astarion gains an ability to perform a bonus action, which will allow him to move further, hide, or disengage from an enemy. The last thing related to actions I want to mention here is Astarion's sneak attack ability. Rogues get a pretty amazing ability right from the start, which allows them to deal extra damage to an enemy under certain conditions. For the sneak attack, the conditions are that you must have advantage over the enemy, or an ally of yours must be within 5 feet of the enemy you're attacking. If Astarion is attempting to attack an enemy in plain sight, there is no advantage and therefore he cannot use the sneak attack. But if he hides or goes invisible, he instantly gains an advantage over the enemy, and so the sneak attack becomes available. Similarly, if he waits for, say, your barbarian or your fighter to engage the enemy and be within melee distance, he will then gain the ability to sneak attack. At level 1, the sneak attack is an additional 1d6 of damage. As the levels increase, so does the damage of the sneak attack. There are a couple of important things left on the sheet we haven't tackled yet, so let's take a look at them now. The inspiration box is for when the DM gives you inspiration. Inspiration means you get to reroll a d20 for any check that's called that you failed. Inspiration doesn't stack, so until you've used it up, you can't get another one. As an elf, Astarion is immune to being put to sleep by magic. Furthermore, if anybody tries to charm him, he has an advantage on the saving throw. The advantage on the saving throw means he gets to roll the d20 twice and take the highest score. Additionally, he can also see in dim light and in the dark. When it comes to resting, elves don't need a full 8 hours to sleep. They only need to meditate for about 4 hours to gain the benefits of a long rest. Finally, we need to talk about his personality. When creating your character in D&D, you get to write out their backstory, define their characteristics, what their alignment is, and what their personality traits are. For Astarion, his backstory revolves around a personal quest and goals which are revealed within the game. His personality traits give you a further insight into why he behaves the way he does. Creating a good character backstory and playing in line with your character's personality is a great way to get inspiration from the DM, and it steers you away from metagaming. As for Astarion's alignment, it isn't set here, and that's because in the game you play Astarion, so you decide whether he's chaotic, good, evil, lawful, etc. We've now managed to successfully create Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3 into a D&D character sheet. All that's left is to add some items of clothing, some adventuring gear, and we're good to go. I deliberately chose Astarion to begin with because he's mostly a non-magical character. This means you don't have to worry about spell slots, spell attacks, spell lists, and so on. Instead, I chose to focus on explaining more what the skills are and the abilities and how they work. For future videos, I won't be explaining the character sheet in the same way, but instead I'll use that time to focus on specific skills or spells that character has. Speaking of future videos, make sure you tune in next time where I'll be recreating another fan favourite, Karlach. If there's anything you found confusing or maybe that I didn't explain well enough, please leave a comment below. I do look at all the comments and I do try and take on board all your advice as much as possible. Don't forget to catch my live streams here and on Twitch where I stream D&D every Saturday night. Lastly, please feel free to join our wonderful Discord community. Thank you so much for watching and I'll catch you again next time.